Today's event on restaurant workers increasing identification through outreach is presented in collaboration with the Asian Women's Shelter of San Francisco. Today's presenter is Hediana Utarti, who is currently the Community Advocate Coordinator and has served as the organization's primary anti-trafficking person from 2006 to 2020. So lots of experience at our disposal here. And I've actually had the pleasure to interact with Hediana and some of her clients in person and can just tell you how much dedication, heart, and soul she puts into all of her work and makes a huge impact on the lives of her clients. So I'm excited to pass it over to Hediana and let her uh, share her expertise on how to connect with clients and this population.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Framework, for having me. Again, I'm Hediana from Asian Women's Shelter, and my organization have been around for 33 years, and we are primarily a domestic violence agency, but actually a big chunk of our work is on anti-trafficking. So today, I hope we can learn about restaurant industry a little bit in the US, gain some insight into the experience of the workers and understand possible partners and outreach access points. So just want to let you know, I based this presentation on a lot of conversation and interviews with former clients who have had a job in the restaurant industry, as well as my interviews with my coworkers, the caseworkers or case managers who have worked with labor trafficking survivors. So as you know, because we are from the West Coast, the examples are mostly from San Francisco Bay Area. So I hope our examples here actually relevant for those of you in the other regions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's just talk a little bit about restaurant industry. Before COVID, according to the National Restaurant Association, there is a 899 billion industry with millions of locations and with about 15.5 million employees. So it's a huge industry. So from this million of people that, that the employees we are talking about, today we're gonna focus on those, the folks who are actually are at risk or have vulnerabilities that actually put them, at risk for exploitation of labor trafficking. Young people who just start working, who don't really know their rights, for instance, or newcomers to the US who don't quite know what are their rights or don't know anyone are at risk. There is a situation with individuals with cognitive differences. People with disability are also at risk. And this is a little note for everyone that in 2019 in South Carolina, there was a case of labor trafficking where a manager actually forced someone with intellectual disability to work more than 100 hours per week without pay. So folks who are waiting for their work permit or folks who are undocumented are even more vulnerable to exploitation. This is something that you all know. I don't have to repeat it, but I want to acknowledge that it's happening. So next slide, please. So these are the types of work in the restaurant industry. I assume all of you have gone to a restaurant, so you have seen the bartenders, the famous chefs, and head cooks that have show on TV as well, the cook, food and beverage, the servers folks. There's food prep, and there's wait folks. So the survivors of labor trafficking that I have spoken to were mostly dishwasher and cleaning. So according to them, in the hierarchy of restaurant work, they are way, at the bottom. Next slide, please. So these are a general condition that's happening in many restaurant work. If you look at the left side, the blue one, the condition that may impact their physical well-being, many of them standing for a long time, chopping. And so they might be in a hot or cold environment, poor ventilation, long hours standing or walking. There's always a risk of getting burned and cuts and accident. And there's this normalization of no breaks and no overtime. So there's this, what you call it, almost a demand, by the owner that you keep on working. On the right side, you see the condition that may impact someone's well-being. There's sexual harassment going on. There is race and ethnicity-based harassment. I will give you examples very soon. There's a high risk of drug and alcohol use. So what's happened, what I heard was that because there is this demand to work a lot, then people start taking a drug that's an upper drug so that they can continue working. There's also a possible seclusion. I will give you an example very soon, but these are the general conditions that's actually putting people at risk. Next slide, please. These are some stories that survivors share with me. If you look at the very left, this is from somebody who is now doing well. So this is our old stories. I'm happy to report to you. This person said, I got to work by 10 a.m. before all the staff arrived, did lots of prep, chopping onion, vegetable around lunchtime, start washing dishes. Did that all day and then left at 10 p.m. and he never had a chance to talk to anyone. So basically he was in a small situation, poor ventilation, and just working and working. The next one on top, we work as dishwasher and cleaning and maybe some food prep. We didn't have any interaction with the outside world. So this is a husband and wife who actually came to the US and was trafficked. And the bottom one, I was the only Spanish-speaking worker in an Asian restaurant. I did prep and clean. I see that the owner and chefs are friends. The waitresses are their family. I know they watch me all the time. So there is always a possibility of race-based or ethnic-based oppression or exploitation here. And then the left one, if we think about it, the person who worked from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m., that's a good example of seclusion and long hours and seclusion. Next slide, please. So what are the trafficking indicators in here? First, as you can see, long work hours, there's unfair wage practices, or number 4, using immigration status to reduce wage. So what I heard was that because when someone does not have a work permit, then what happens is the owner will offer you a pay, but under minimum wage. Or you get paid minimum wage, but then when you work overtime, they don't give you anything. So it's a slippery slope between legal and illegal. And if you look at number 3, some owners basically take the tips away. They just take the tip jar and walk away with that. Very little or no rest, discouraging employee communication. This is interesting. Some of our clients said that the restaurant manager practiced divide and conquer management. So what they do is that if I were a manager, I will tell Charlie, I pay you a little bit more, but don't tell anyone. And then I will tell Megan, I'm going to give you bus pass, but don't tell anyone. So I basically make sure that I created a climate of distrust, among my workers. There's harassment and abuse going on. There's threats, of course, basically for people who are new in the restaurant worker or who are undocumented. They say, if you don't work, you get fired, or if you don't work, I'll report you to Homeland Security. So, and the rest, there's a lot of exhaustive work environment. There's surveillance. if my workers talk to each other, I will do something to make sure that, that you will not be able to build solidarity. And using ethnicity or language to isolate. So this is what happened with the Spanish speaking worker or dishwasher working in the Asian restaurant. So when you think about creating an outreach material, you can always go straight to the point. For instance, you ask a question, did anyone take your tips away? Or are you working long hours? Or uh, are you being paid fairly? Something like that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the possible access point and possibilities and challenges. So we identify 3 possibilities: other restaurant workers, industry workers itself, and surrounding community. Next slide, please. So let's talk about other restaurant workers who are in the restaurant beside uh, the dishwasher, the person. There are greeters, wait staff, chef, prep cook, dishwasher. So in my observation, and I heard this from other restaurant observer or analysts, is that um, in the front of the restaurant, the greeters usually have a light-skinned, beautiful-looking people. And many restaurants actually employ Caucasian to be the greeters. And then you have the manager, who is usually male. And then most of the kitchen staff are usually people of color. So there's this, in San Francisco, people say that most of the people who work in the kitchen are Mexican. So I cannot qualify that. I haven't done any academic, resource, but based on my observation, that is true. I go out 3-4 times a week. So um, uh, I think it tend to be true. So what's happening here is that there is this hierarchy: who is doing work where, what ethnicity or what race, and also their immigration status. So is there any way at all actually to ask the other restaurant workers to actually watch for each other? There's a situation that that's one of our friends shared. He was once working in an ethnic restaurant a few years ago when he was in school, and he had a work permit, speak English, and his job was to greet guests and set up table and take order. So he noticed that the owner yelled and screamed to the cook a lot, and the cook was actually a very good cook, but the owner wanted her to work faster and faster. So this situation is not labor trafficking, maybe, we don't know, but for sure it creates a climate of fear. And people always ask, so why don't you just leave? Just like in domestic violence, why don't you just leave? Now, the restaurant workers usually have a strong network of each other. So it is always possible that if a workers leave and they don't have a strong network, the owner can actually spread lies and prevent the workers to get a job. Next slide, please.
All right, everyone. So this is the fun part of Framework events. Please use the link in the chat to open up a new tab or use your phone. Take out your phone, pull up your camera, and select that QR code just like if you've done to any gone to any restaurants during COVID, and start putting in your answers, considering how do you empower other workers at the restaurants to report the things that they're seeing. Like in Hediana's story, there was an individual who was working in the restaurant and they weren't experiencing the um, the forced fraud or coercion, but they saw it happening to other people in the restaurant. So, what are some ways that you can empower workers to make those reports or to utilize your outreach?
Thank you, everyone. Yes, yes. I think everyone has great. Oh, I'm missing. Support them by saying you'll go with them to report it, educating workers about their rights and obligation, establishing, provide multiple ways to report workers' rights, build trust by actually established services. Mm-hmm.
I love all the comments on building
Mm-hmm.
trust, on creating that comfort, allowing for people to report anonymously. I saw that. Thank you for that.
Yes, that's great. Anonymous reporting is good because sometimes people want to report and they don't, they don't want to say anything about who they are. Um, Call your nearest Department of Labor Wage Hour Division. If you're a regular customer, be kind to them so build trust and later have a dialogue with them. Correct. Yes, yes, yes. That's
Beautiful.
yeah. Later on, somebody, one of our client, actually exactly did that thing.
We'll leave this up for about 30 seconds more. Keep sharing your answers. I see that about a fourth of you are participating. Thank you so much. We'll
Slip them
give
a business card.
we'll
Mm-hmm.
give a couple more people the opportunity to participate if you'd like.
Yeah. So actually, one of the worker that was secluded, the way he actually left the situation was actually there was somebody, a priest, actually saw him and talked to him, and slowly, I think months later, they were able to actually get in touch, and that priest actually found Asian Women Shelter. So one thing that was helpful is that not to go to police not to go to law enforcement, but to go to uh, social services and get some information. Yeah, thank you. Be there to listen until worker is ready and support the worker's decision to report. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You'll have more opportunities to participate in the future.
All right, we go to the next slide. So these are other industry workers we can talk about. There are suppliers, there's delivery people, and now there is this third-party delivery like Postmates, Grubhub, Drizzly. So Mr. A here said that he interacted briefly with all delivery people who drop off veggies, rice, etc., but they don't speak English and I speak very little. So I only said hi. If I speak more English, maybe I can help. So language is another is something to think about. Yeah. Next slide, please. Also surrounding community. The couple that shared their work, their situation earlier said when they work in the restaurant, they were actually in the mall. And there were two workers from the next door cafes who tried to talk to them, but they didn't understand English at the time. So they just smiled back and said thank you. So if they speak my language, perhaps they could have helped us. So again, language is something important. So surrounding community, we look at nearby businesses. There's local employees of other industries, security guards, like in the mall, janitors, etc. There's community members, of course. And then the survivor would travel, from wherever they live and visit some location. Is it possible to actually connect with them? Uh, Next slide, please. So the idea is that, is it possible at all to actually work with other units, surrounding us and provide them training on how to notice exploitative situation, maybe collaborate with them to provide workers with skills and knowledge on how to help out, like where to call, maybe just where to call. And also we can think about considering how and in what forms the information can be shared. Um, There's a chat here from Paul Chang that say even when workers are rescued, make sure they do not return to the San Gabriel Valley or Flushing. If they return to this area, they will likely be re-trafficked. Thank you, Paul. Next slide, please. This is a note from one of our clients. He said, if you suspect there's somebody like me in the kitchen, don't come to the kitchen and talk to me. But wait until the end of my shift and meet me at the bus stop. If you speak my language and explain to me there's a place I can call, that will be helpful. So that's actually what happened to this person. Somebody from a church actually come and talk to him months and months later. Then he was willing to meet somebody and connect the person to us. Next slide, please. So these are additional partners that we can work with. I'm gonna start from the bottom because the top one actually have much more stories, but with the bottom. Government agencies or government task-based task force. So in San Francisco, our city actually have anti-trafficking task force, and they work with us to produce different kinds of stuff, different kinds of education material. They actually did campaign or education material for a nail salon, for instance. So that's one thing, one possibility. Asian Women's Shelter work with other domestic violence and social service agencies. We actually train their frontline workers on how to screen or provide information for folks who sounds like in a labor trafficking situation. So we let them know where to call, or usually if the client actually call Asian Women's Shelter, then our own case manager will actually give them a call. In San Francisco, we have San Francisco Domestic Violence Consortium, which is a consortium of all about 14 or 17 DV agencies. And so to tell you the truth, the success of our anti-trafficking work actually is riding on the success of the consortium solidarity. So it makes it a little easier for us to do education and campaign through this network. Medical care. We work closely with a clinic that is called Refugee Clinic in San Francisco General Hospital. Refugee Clinic is under Department of Public Health, but they provide services of health care for new refugees. So we usually talk with them and work together to create some kind of a way to help health workers to screen for possible human trafficking. And finally, the community-based groups. So at Asian Women's Shelter, some of you probably know, one of our big thing is actually language access. So we are able to provide language access to in 40 languages. We recruited community members to be part of the our language advocate pool. As a result of it, then we have different groups. We have one of the strongest group today is the Thai group. There's a few Thai language advocate, and they have a community group together. So we try to reach out to the Thai community through this group, through prevention education using Thai language. So they help us with creating a flyer, as well as strategizing who to go to and where to go. So right now we have the Thai group, we have a very strong Korean group, we also have a Nepali group, and I'm working with the Indonesian group. And then we have a very strong Arab Women Services as well, where we do outreach to different Arabic speaking communities. So, and however, when we work with the community group, just remember it'll take us a long time. It takes us 3-4 years until we actually get to the point where we actually can work with a group of people, because they need to, to see, they need to trust us, that what is their, and make sure that our intention and their purpose in getting together is actually similar. Um, we also work with church group or temples or mosque, when needed. So one thing that we want to pay attention when working with the community group is teaching or educating everyone about safety and confidentiality, because sometimes the cases is in the community and the abuser might be from the community as well. So this is something to think about. Also, when you work with LGBTQI plus communities, the community might be small. So really be really careful about confidentiality and safety. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what we did, what we created with Department of Public Health. And I want to give a shout out to Asian Law Caucus, who actually help us putting this together. So this handout looks just like a flyer, actually, just like a piece of paper like this. So the idea is actually to share information, to educate the public about safety at work. We don't even talk about human trafficking. So this is a combination of possible human trafficking and your rights at work. I hope you can see a little bit. So the first thing we ask is like, do you earn less than minimum wage? So that's something to think about. And then number 4, does your employer keep or take cuts of your tips? And then, but the bottom one, almost at the bottom one, you say, have you been threatened by your employer in relation to your immigration status, or do you feel unsafe to leave your job to work at other places? So the idea, basically, the idea is just to get people to think about safety, not only health safety, but also in wage, in terms of their wage or salary, and also their freedom of movement. Next slide, please. In San Francisco, we have a lot of conversation about employee or independent contractor. But the point of this second page of this slide is, if you see the blue letters, it says, no matter if you're employee or independent contractor, you have the right to a safe workplace free of discrimination. So if somebody doesn't feel good about their workplace, then they can give us a call. That's the idea. And we do this when we use this brochure or this flyer. We actually not asking people, are you in the situation? No, our approach has been, if you see somebody in this situation, can you have them, give us a call, so we're doing it, thinking about the survivors as a third person, not assuming that our audience is experiencing labor trafficking. Next slide, please. This is a quick example of what we did with our partner at APILO, Asian Pacific Islander Legal Outreach, which is the same thing about safe at work. And but this is what you call it, designed exactly for seniors, because at that time, this is in 2019, there were cases where some of our seniors, folks in their 60s and 70s, were actually forced to work in a senior homes. Next slide, please. So these are some survivor tips that when I interview them, I ask them, is there any tips you want to share with me? So this is what they say. Some of them say, the first one say, if you see our faces looking tense, call the city, just like some of you have said. And then somebody said, if you see somebody that looks underage, go report them. If you look at number 3, one survivor actually say, don't go do outreach yourself, Hediana. I do it for you. So, because they will not trust you because you're strangers, but I know people. So it's great that some of our survivors actually, are willing or ready to actually support. If you look at number 2, there's a suggestion to connect through established communities. Um, so it might work that way. However, if you look at the fourth suggestion, the person actually say, just because you speak my language does not mean I trust you. So my own people have heard me. So you can give me a phone number and I'll find out myself if I can't trust you. So uh, connecting with established communities, language access is something to think about, but we do have to check with survivors themselves, what is their preference. Thank you. We're gonna go to the next one.
Growing up, Jen dreamt of opportunity. Jen met with a family friend who helped her get a job in the United States. It cost $30,000 for the needed documents and travel expenses, but Jen was told she'd make $100 a day. When she arrived in America, Jen worked day and night in a restaurant as a dishwasher and prep cook, where she slept in the back. She would dream of taking a break outside, but was told the police would find her if she stepped out of the restaurant. 3 years later, during a local business meeting at the restaurant, a man took notice of Jen and offered for her to work at his restaurant for a higher wage. Jen was excited by this new opportunity, but the abuse by this restaurant owner was different. However, she was allowed to go to the local community center, where she made some friends. One day, Jen had enough and visited a center for expecting moms in need. She reached out for help in hopes of keeping her baby safe.
All right, we're doing it again. Feel free to use the link in the chat or your phone with the QR code to connect with us at slido.com and let us know, where did you see in that video of examples that outreach could be placed to reach Jen? There were tons and tons in the beautiful video made by our intern, Jenna. Thank you so much for this. So let us know what you caught. And while you're all typing all of your answers, you can answer as many times as you want. So keep them coming, keep them going, be exhaustive, be creative.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious if, Hediana, this was a real case for you. Could you tell us a little bit more about that person's experience?
Well, the good thing is that she's doing good. Actually, the person at the community center really pay attention to what Jin needs, and actually help her actually to leave the relationship and actually move her to another city where Jin was connected to us, and so we start applying for. Well, we connect her to our attorneys, of course, and then and our attorney was able to see it as labor trafficking. So we were working on that, and while waiting for the T visa, then we apply for public benefit for Jin and the baby. So in the meantime, there is a community organization or community center that support her with basic food, like we have a food pantry, like a weekly food pantry. She can access that. So that was a story of maybe 5 years ago. So right now she's in school and the baby is in school, and so she's hoping to get an AA degree so that she can get a better job. So it is not impossible to support the situation.
That's amazing, and also a fantastic example about the dedication that really pays off in this work for for these labor trafficking survivors. So thank you so much, Hediana, for all the work that you did and that your organization did for that individual. And just a little background too, that for in that video, the first trafficking location, again, she wasn't allowed outside at any point. She slept in the restaurant, and it wasn't until that second location that she was allowed to go to the community center and the bus stop. So a need to be creative to really access all labor trafficking survivors. And we've got great answers. You can keep them coming. Hediana, what are you seeing?
I'm very happy that people can see that, a center that thinks about the baby is great, mother center, bus stop, like a poster in the bus stop probably will be helpful. And customers, again, if customers see something that's a little iffy, go ahead, get some help, because I think perhaps we could interrupt, we could interject before she fell into the second one. Perhaps we could do that. Somebody said somewhere outside after work, away from the restaurant, restaurant customer who noticed Jean may have noticed Jean if they were paying attention. It is all possible. Yeah, it's all possible. And also, when she was flying into the US, I wonder if the American embassy actually pay attention to that, like giving her some kind of a brochure and say, if you are in the US and somebody do this and this is not legal, don't do it. And actually have a phone number where to call if something like that happens. I think that's one thing that we keep on hearing, is that, whoops, they know this is not good, this is not happening, but where do we call? That's another thing. The couple that was working in the mall, for instance, they came to a small town in California, can't remember what it was, maybe around LA area, and they wanted to call somebody, and they called the Indonesian consulate. These are two Indonesian people, and that's why they were connected to us. But the consulate didn't know what to do. They called me. So I think we also need to work with, if it is a foreign national, we need to work with the consulate as well. Thank you.
Fantastic feedback in that. Thank you everyone for participating. Thanks for thinking about the different moments of this person's journey. And just a reminder, we get this question a lot. What if there is no force, fraud, or coercion? Well, then you're still providing an individual information of something that is also illegal, violating employee rights. And Hediana, I'll pass it back to you.
Yes. So think about think about the other restaurant workers, how can we empower them to actually to stop this kind of exploitation? This one, somebody actually, the right, bottom right, somebody actually give the restaurant workers their rights. There's delivery workers that might be able to notice something. So it's very important to talk about employee rights. So it is probably good to do something that's not saying labor trafficking, because some people don't see themselves as a victim, but to talk about employees' rights. Next slide, please. And again, yes, can we interrupt it from the beginning when somebody said, let's go to America, and earn $100. Is that right? Is that right? That's one thing, one huge myth about the US, right? The American dream. That's something that probably all of us have to work on to to stop that myth. And at the airport, maybe at the airport we should have more information about workers' rights and things to like warning signs, maybe. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Next slide, please. So, so based on our conversation with our clients, these are some ideas on when we create outreach material, how it should be. They want it to be short and concise. If it is a print in a small card rather than a brochure, and have a phone number or a website is helpful. And make sure somebody, a person, answer the phone calls or return the voicemail, because a lot of the flyers, government flyers, have numbers, but when we call, there's really no one there. And that really discourages people to call. Next slide, please. So I'm going to share with you a couple of things that we tried, and we are successful. We are not always successful, but we feel we are pretty successful in outreaching certain, some communities using the community-based agencies. So these are palm cards that we created actually together with our attorneys at Asian Pacific Islander Legal Outreach, APILO. Our collaborative is called the Anti-Trafficking Collaborative of the Bay Area. This is a palm card that has two sides. So it's a palm card. It's a palm card for people who have big hands. It's a little too big for me, I'm sorry, but something like this. And one side is English and the other side is another language. So something like this can be, just like one of you said that, give them your business card or something. So this is something that we can slip to someone according to, with the language that we think is appropriate. The red one is in Chinese, and the green one is in Spanish. Next slide, please. This is just example of some social media that we have done. We can use social media when it's appropriate. Sometimes there are trolls in the social media, so do be careful about that. This is from the Indonesian outreach folks and the Thai community folks. And so basically every quarter, we usually just put a poster about labor trafficking and that they can give us a call. Next slide, please. And finally, billboards. Billboards is still powerful. This is an old billboard that my organization and APILO, Asian Pacific Islander Legal Outreach, created. I think in 2000, before 2010 for sure. And we put it in bus stop, in a train station, and also inside the bus. So when people sit down and look up and they see it on the ceiling of the bus. And this is a poster that describes 3 types of possible labor trafficking, which is dishwashing, tailor, or whatever, sewing, and also cleaning. And it's written in 4 languages. Yeah, so I think that is it for now from me. We have 10 minutes or so for a Q&A or comments. Maybe some of our participants can share their work as well. And if you want to do that, please do. Thank you.
Yes, so please continue with the questions that you might have in the Q&A. And I'm also sharing our satisfaction survey in the link. You can access it here via QR code as well. And let us know your feedback, because we take it to heart. We use it to create all of our events. So let us know. And Hediana, we have one question here. Has there been talk of alternatives to palm cards for folks who cannot read? I work with lots of folks who cannot read or write in their own language or in English. Fantastic question. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So I think at AWS, we really, really rely on our language advocates or our connection with the community. That's what we do. And for me in the Indonesian community, I give this away, but people just not paying attention. So usually we go to a small gathering. Um, we go to Domestic Workers Alliance. We go to youth group. We go to a small fellowship. Anywhere that people get together, more than like 3 or 5 people, will just go and talk to them. So yes, it's very good. It's very important to actually identify what do you call it? I don't want to call it important members, but some members in the community that actually have connection, that people give them a call because they have been there longer or something like that. So religious leader is possible, or somebody who knows a lot of people. In our Arab Women Services, we know a couple women who are who knows a lot of people. So we actually always ask her to, can you get your friends together to, and can we talk about this? And sometimes we don't do the whole human trafficking, 1 hour presentation. No, we probably just talk about, if you're not being paid, that's not good, give us a call, maybe just that, yeah.
I love the
So
low threshold entry.
yeah, and also long-term relationship, right? It takes like 2-3 years to get them to actually hear you out and interested about the situation. Somebody that something in the chat.
Yeah, so we have a really considerate question from the chat for an individual who might be perceived as a person who would be perceived perhaps as a white privileged savior. How do I go about starting direct outreach? What are some things that they can be considerate of?
Wow, great. I'm going to answer the one underneath that because I think it's a shorter answer from Jessica. Jessica said, really love the palm cards idea. Thank you for sharing. Curious if you're concerned about the organization number getting in the wrong hands. So Jessica, what we did is the number that we have there is our attorney's number. So the attorney deal with them. So yes, sometimes the attorneys get called by abuser or trafficker themselves, but once they know it's a legal organization, they usually disappear on us. So, as the other question about the white privilege savior, thank you for bringing it up, and I think this is something that we want to think about. And it's not only white privilege savior, but some people also feel like they're more educated. Because I'm more educated, I want to help people who are not that educated. And there are projects in the university who are doing this because they're from the university and they want to help people who are not educated. So there is always this thing going on, privileged, unprivileged thing. I would say that work closely with the organization or with a group that we think is interested in this issue, for instance. And so for us, when working with my community, with the Indonesian community, for instance, I try to talk to the consulate, and they're interested, but they're not that interested. Don't tell anyone, okay? This is my secret. No, just kidding. And so what worked for me at the time was actually working with some religious leaders. So there, I have one person, a woman who have been in the US for, I don't know, 40 years. And people come to her during religious, what you call it, holidays, like the Eid in the Muslim world is the Eid. So I actually approach her and I ask her, how many groups do you have? And she has 4 or 5, one in the East Bay, one in, San Jose. So I use her as a way to enter, because even though I am not identify as a white person, they don't, the survivors don't really identify with me. Who are you? You know, you might be somebody from the organization, and the organization might have something to do with the government, and you're from the university, we're not, you know, so there's always a class issue as well. So the way I work it out is I actually ask this this lady to help me how is best to actually to work with folks. And she said, give me the information and I'll talk to them first. So one way to do this is actually take the lead from the people from the community that can use our support. And then we actually take a step back and say, I have information I want to give you. Can you help me do the information? If something happened, give me a call. So I'm not the person who is doing the talking a lot of time. They are doing it. And then they say, if you want to know more, call Hediana. So you know what I mean? So we're working with them. We're working behind them. We're not leading the effort. Sometimes it works. That's basically what I've been doing. But it takes me 5 years to get there, you guys. So be patient.
I'm gonna ask this next question because it kind of builds off of what you just shared. What if those partner organizations don't focus on labor trafficking? What if they don't find that to be as important?
Yeah. We cannot force them, but what we have done is actually we just give them information. This is similar to domestic violence, right? We're trying to go somewhere to do information about the shelter, and they're like, there's no DV in our community. We're cool, we're this and that. So we're like, okay. However, if you hear somebody else in this situation, not you, not your community, but maybe your neighbor, give us a call. So it's like deflecting and hang in there. We have to keep on doing that. Yeah. So
Beautiful. Someone else asked, what if they're not forced to work, but they have no choice but work for the low pay? Can they still report?
I think so. I think it's good just to check, you know, because I think labor trafficking, exploitation and labor trafficking is a slippery slope, right? It used to be 10, I would say maybe 5-6 years ago, it used to be freedom of movement. Like if I'm stuck, if I'm a nanny and I cannot leave the place that I work with, the freedom of movement is one of the proof of labor trafficking, that basically our attorney can use that. Hediana doesn't have freedom of movement, and they're harboring an alien. If I were an alien, I mean, non-US citizen. But now a lot of our labor trafficking survivors, they have freedom of movement. They also know where their passport are, because in the past it used to be the employer keep the passport away, but they don't do that anymore. So now the situation is exploitative. Like you're not being paid, you're paid, but you're not being paid, right? And that's very hard. So in my case, usually we just take it as a labor trafficking anyway and provide social services, and then we take the client immediately to our attorney, and then we can discuss that some more. Yeah.
And if your organization ever has questions, reach out to the organizations in your area that are doing the labor trafficking work, or your friends at Framework, because that is what we're here for. If you have any questions, is like Hediana said, it's nuanced. It's hard when you don't have those like clear indicators that we use to really advertise in our outreach, and we have to think kind of in between the lines and about those hostile environments and climates of fear, etc. And another person asks, if I don't speak the language, should I still hand out materials in that language?
Thank you. I actually now can see the Q&A. I did not see that before. It depends on your relationship with the community. I am not Chinese. I know a couple words in Chinese, but I do have quite a few friends who are in the laundry industry, for instance. So I just say, okay, this one is in Chinese. I said, hey, this is from my organization, and I would like to share this with you. And if you want to talk to somebody who speaks Chinese, I have a friend who can talk to you. So again, we can play the role as a messenger, not the person who come forward and be an educator. Yeah, I think sharing the information itself is already helpful.
Thank you so much, Hediana. That is incredibly valuable information. All that you have shared, all of the stories, all of the survivor tips, all of the professional tips on how we can access this population and individuals that are vulnerable for experiencing labor trafficking in the restaurant industry has been absolutely fantastic. We appreciate you. Audience, continue to give us feedback and Hediana feedback in that satisfaction survey, and connect with us at our next and final event, which will be on creating outreach materials. This is where you'll be able to put everything together from all of the events, whether or not it was for the agriculture industry, restaurant industry, uh, American youth who have experienced labor trafficking, domestic workers, all of the above, and other industries. This is where you can come and put all that information together and find out how to make this for your area, for your organization. We appreciate you being here with us today. We appreciate you, Hediana, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Megan and Charlie, for the opportunity. Hello.
Absolutely.
Hi, bye from the West Coast. Okay.